to say hello as well.
Okay, well, I just hit the record button, so we are now recording, and we will send that recording link out to Silvana to distribute and post out on the website as needed. So I am Yona Cohen, and I am the TRACS training coordinator, and I will be your guide through the TRACS performance reporting side later today. Mike, back to you.
Thanks, Yona. And I guess I just briefly want to introduce a couple other people on the Whisper team who are on the call. Ryan Oster and Heidi Nelson are my partners in crime on the Whisper training branch. So they'll be running support here in the background today as well. We have Debbie Wersensky on, who operates the TRACS help desk, and many of you maybe have reached out to her at some point during our adventures with TRACS, and so she's a wealth of knowledge, and we're happy to have her here as well. And then we also have Nicole and Danielle. I don't want to accidentally butcher your last names, but I want to welcome you both as well, who are helping out on some of the grants management aspects of these multi-state grant programs. So thank you very much all for being here. And hopefully I didn't miss anybody. Feel free to raise your hand. If I did, I apologize. But with that, Silvana, I'll hand it over to you to give a brief welcome.
Hey, thank you, Mike. My name is Silvana Jarszczak. I have talked to you all, I believe. I don't know if there's any new applicant here I haven't met or haven't seen in one of the webinars. Thank you so much for making time for this one. It's really important. I am new to this one, so I'm really excited. And if you have never had a webinar with this team, you're on for a treat. They're amazing. Thank you so much, Whisper training team, for putting this together. And let's go.
All right, thanks. All right, with that, Yona, I'll hand the screen over to you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Go ahead and pull up the slides here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just in case, because sometimes the volume's not great, just fix my headphones here. Okay. Can you still hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. Are you seeing the agenda slide?
Yes, we have it in presentation mode.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so again, welcome to the TRACS reporting part of the webinar. So 6 to 7 months ago, we kicked off the 2022 grants with a webinar for recipients on how to enter your initial grant information into TRACS. And we're happy to have you back for the second part of the life cycle of the grant entry, which is the performance reporting side. And today's session we have for 2.5 hours. So the first part of the session will focus on TRACS and the performance reporting tool you will use to complete that those metrics. We're going to take a look at some overview slides, and then we'll go through a walkthrough demonstration of reporting. And then I'll hand it back over to Mike, who will complete the financial reporting and the grant solutions piece. So we're just going to go through a few slides that provide an overview of the system. Okay. So Grant Solutions, there is one of the systems that we utilize, and grant recipients really use two primary systems during the life cycle of the grant. Grant Solutions is the grant management system for all federal awards managed by the Department of the Interior, and it is used throughout the grant life cycle from the application phase to the grant closeout. TRACS serves as a complementary system that provides the performance reporting tool for grant programs managed by the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program, which includes the multi-state conservation grants. So data entry is required in both systems, and we recommend to streamline the process that you use TRACS first to generate your TRACS performance report as a PDF, and then you can use that PDF to upload into Grant Solutions as part of the financial reporting that you will need to close out in that system. And Mike will show you later on how to do that. So some important dates are on the screen as well. Final performance reports are due 120 days from the end date of the period of performance. And for interim reports, these are due 90 days from the end date of the interim reporting period. So for final reports with a grant end date of December 30th, 2022, you will have a report due the end of April. And for multi-year grants or grants with interim periods of performance, you will have those reports due end of March timeframe. So just keep that in mind, and you can always reference back to the AFWA materials and to your grant paperwork for additional details and dates. So that's just a little overview of some of those important dates coming up. And then this slide shows the grant process workflow page, which is the home base for your grant in TRACS. The page here is going to show 4 steps that need to be completed in TRACS. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 you can see here. With steps 1 and 2, the initial steps that you will have already completed in TRACS, hopefully at this point. Step 1 is the grant information that you enter with your grant proposal, and step 2 are the project statements that you'll enter into the system that include all of your objectives that you plan to carry out in the grant. Once you enter steps 1 and 2, that's initially done after you receive your grant funding and you've been awarded the grant, you'll go into TRACS, put in steps 1 and 2. The non-federal and federal approvers will go in and they will approve step 2, your project statements. Once they've completed the approvals process, it will show as green and complete for steps 1 and 2. And then step 3 is completed by the federal contacts that you have on your grant. So this step is typically being completed by John and Lori, and when they go in and approve your grant in step 2, then they will attach the financial information in step 3. When that's done, it becomes green and complete. So once steps 1, 2, and 3 are green and complete in TRACS, then step 4 becomes available. And you will see that you will have available actions to enter the performance reports. So ideally, when you go into TRACS, you should see 1, 2, and 3 green and complete, and step 4 should be red and not started, and you should have a button to enter your performance reports. So that's the ideal state that you want to be at this point in the game. If you go into TRACS and one of the previous steps is still incomplete, you'll need to work with your in TRACS to enter any missing information and also work with your non-federal and federal approvers to make sure that it gets approved and any missing information such as step 3 is completed before you can get to that to that performance reporting side. So that's the steps or the grant process workflow page. I also want to point out, if you do get to step 4 performance reports and you have completed steps 1, 2, and 3, and they are showing as green and complete, but step 4 is still showing as unavailable, then you may have an issue where the grant solutions periods of performance did not get imported into TRACS. So we do periodically import the periods of performance from grant solutions, and that's a back-end process that allows you to then go in and complete step 4, the performance reports. If you do open up your grant in TRACS, and for some of you, you might be really excited to get into TRACS right after this webinar and start doing your performance reporting. If you get to this stage and it's grayed out and unavailable, please have a little bit of patience with us. We are working on getting those missing periods of performance for some grants entered into TRACS so you can get into the performance reporting. Please let us know by contacting the TRACS help desk so we can create a ticket and we can track this missing information and get that resolved for you. So if you run into this, contact the TRACS help desk. Okay.
I'd like to add just one thing to that.
Yes. Yes, thanks, Debbie.
You submit the your help desk ticket to TRACS help desk. Go ahead and give me your federal award number, which is the number from Grant Solution. Also, if you do have a period of, if you do have a performance report that is due, go ahead and file an extension over in Grant Solution.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. So Debbie is our primary lead on the TRACS help desk and our grant specialist in our team. So if you do work with the help desk, chances are you'll be working with Debbie, who is awesome. So thank you, Debbie, for that. And if you do run into this issue, just let us know. Okay. So the next slide goes through just a little bit more background information about how performance reports are set up in TRACS. So we have two parts to the TRACS performance report. The first part are the objective reports, and these are going to document progress towards meeting your project goals. When you enter an objective report, the report will include a specific unit of measure for the objectives that you originally set up when you entered your project statement. So at this point, when you're going into performance reporting, you'll be documenting the actual amount that you managed to achieve. So if you said you were going to hold, for example, let's say 15 webinars, you might document that you were able to hold 10 out of the 15, and that for the next year, you'll plan to hold the additional 5. So you'll be reporting on the exact metrics when you get to that objective report. In TRACS, we have a really nice system of specific units of measure and specific quantified data that we're looking for that is located on that master document called the TRACS Performance Matrix. So when you originally set up your objectives, you will have used the standardized objectives activities in order to set up your unit of measure. And that's what we're reporting on in that first section. The second section are the performance questionnaire questions, which we consider, or what we call the 6 magic questions. These provide narrative context, recommendations, best practices, and highlight the accomplishments of the objectives that you've completed for your grant. So just to show you the questions themselves all in one place, for each project statement and for each period of performance, you will answer these 6 narrative questions. And in some cases, you may check a not applicable box if it does not apply. But for questions 1 and 2, those are really the meat and potatoes of your performance report. And this is the narrative information about what you've completed. So in question 1, what progress has been made towards completing the objectives of your project? Question 1 is a summary narrative of all of the work that you've done for your objectives. This is where you'll put all that information together for all of your objectives and write out in a narrative format what you've completed. Question 2, please justify and describe and justify any changes in the implementation of your objectives or approaches. If you did have anything that was changed, this is a great place to document that. So as an example, let's say you had planned to conduct 10 webinars and something happened and you were only able to conduct 9, you might justify why that changed. Or if you had planned to do some outreach events and there was a bad weather event and something was canceled or delayed, you might add that in question 2. And for question 3, if it applies, please share if the project resulted in any unexpected benefits, promising practices, new understandings, cost efficiencies, management recommendations, or lessons learned. This is a great question to reflect on all the great work that you've done and any new understandings that you have that have come out of the project. For question 4, this is for research and survey projects only. If you have a research or survey that's included in your grant as one of your objectives or multiple objectives, you may have some research or some survey work that's continuing from a previous grant. If it applies, you can document in question 4 how the current results compare to prior results in other grant programs or other previous grants. And in each of these questions, there is a place to attach additional documentation. So you'll have a place to attach additional tables, figures, graphs, and other helpful documentation. Question 5 is the place to add and attach additional publications, photographs, screenshots of websites, articles in popular literature, scientific literature, or other public information or outreach products that you've developed out of your grant that you're proud of and you'd like to highlight to the service. This is a nice place to document this as accomplishments of the grant in question 5, and there is a place to add attachments. For question 6, is this a project you wish to highlight for communication purposes? This is a yes or no question, but if this is a grant that you're especially proud of and this project is something you would like to highlight to the Fish and Wildlife Service as a nice example of some work that you've done, let's say in R3, you might say, this is a great example of some R3 work that we've been working on. We're really proud of this. And yes, we would be okay with communicating this out through the service. So if that's a yes, check yes. If no, you can check no and add comments as you like. So that's the questionnaire, and we will take a look at how you enter these questions into TRACS in a few moments. So that takes me to the end of this part of the slide. So let me open up the system here. So the website that I have up is the WSFR Training Portal, and I like to just kind of start here just as a refresher that we do have this great website out here that has some really handy information about TRACS. And if you do open up this WSFR Training Portal and you're looking up information about TRACS, if you do happen to get to a page that asks you for a password, this site does not need a password, so you can just click the green Login as Guest, and it will just let you right back in. Under the TRACS training menu, we have some e-learning courses, which I'd like to point out. So we don't expect you to remember everything we're going to cover today in today's session, which is part of the reason why we are recording today's session, and we'll post that recording link. And we also have some great e-learning courses, short videos, job aids, and other course manuals that you can take a look at and are a great refresher so that if you're getting to the reporting side in a month or two and you're looking for some refresher information about the specific steps you might need to look at for reporting, we do have course 4, TRACS Performance Reporting, which will walk you through the performance reporting steps I'm going to cover today. So course 4, I'm going to actually, before I do that, I'm going to put this link to the WSFR Training Portal into the chat, so you have that. So you can bookmark that if you'd like. Oh, and I see there's a question. Are these questions available somewhere before we get into TRACS? Yes. So great question. I'm actually going to show you that here in just a moment. So let me, post that over here. Okay. So actually, let me show you that first. Under the TRACS training menu, you will find resources and job aids. So I'm going to click on resources and job aids. And in the resources and job aids page, what we have here, besides the performance matrix toolbox, which is this first box here, this includes all of those standardized objectives, activities, and units of measure that you'll need to collect. That's all up here in the matrix. We also have templates. So if you look at TRACS templates, we have a template for performance reporting. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just download this. And I'm going to pop this into, actually, I'm just going to pop the link to where this is into the chat as well. Okay. So the two links that I put in here, one of the links, the first link is for the e-learning courses, and the second link is for this resources page where you will find the performance reporting template. This template is really handy because if I pull it over here, what it provides is the questions. So here in this template, if you are looking for something in a Word document format that you can download a copy of and then just add your information, you can use this as the template. The template does not replace the information you need to enter into TRACS. You will still need to go into the TRACS system and type in your information or copy and paste from this document. So this document provides a really nice tool for collecting the information you will need for TRACS, especially if you're still waiting for, let's say there's something missing with those periods of performance and you're just gathering the information to put into TRACS. Or if you're working with project leaders or other folks in your office or in your organization who are responsible for gathering some of this information about the project for you to then enter into TRACS, you can provide them with this template and they can fill it out and return it to you, and then you can put it all into the system. So on this template, we do have all of those questions. Question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's all on here. And you'll find there are these boxes here. These are just kind of placeholder boxes where you can type your information into the box and expand it or shrink it as you need to. But that's just a nice Word document template for you for collecting the information for the project statement and for the performance report. And just keep in mind that a report is required for each project statement and each period of performance. So if you have a multi-year grant, You may be doing this each year. You may be answering the questions, what progress has been made towards completing the objectives of the project this year, and then next year you'll answer those questions again. So really handy template there. And
So, Yona, one question
Yes.
in the chat. Are there character limits for the responses in the TRACS system?
No, so unless it specifies, there are no character limits. But just keep in mind that you're going to be having Silvana as the non-federal reviewer reviewing this, and your WSFR counterparts doing the federal review and approval. So you don't want to write an entire dissertation in the one of the question narratives, but you want to definitely summarize and add enough adequate detail to really answer the question fully. So that's just what we recommend, but for the most part, there are no character limits unless it specifically says that there are. So I'll show you that where it shows where there are character limits for a few fields. But yeah, great question. So that's our template, and you'll also notice there's also templates for some other things like the grant proposal project statement when you get ready for the next grant cycle and you're ready for a new grant. So that's some of our helpful documentation. And then again, back in the TRACS training menu, we also have those e-learning courses. And what we're covering today is really specific to course 4, performance reporting. So if you need a refresher on how to complete the steps I'm going to show you later on, you can click on course 4. There's a handy manual that you can download or look at online. This has step-by-step instructions and details on how to complete a performance report. We also have a really handy short video, which is lesson 4A, enter your performance report. So you can take a look at that video if you'd like. We have specialized videos on some other topics below as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our TRACS training environment so we can show you the system. And this is our TRACS training site. And when you're back on the WSFR training portal, you can actually get to the TRACS system and the TRACS training environment by going to the quick links menu. So from the quick links menu, you can access the TRACS system itself. That's the live system of TRACS where you will enter your real data and your real grant information, your performance reports. When you click on the TRACS system, it opens up the TRACS login page, which is tracs.fws.gov/login, and you'll use your login.gov information that you set up initially by clicking on this top button to log in. And if you do ever experience any issues with logging in or you need any technical assistance with TRACS, you will see at the bottom of this page, there is a link here in this kind of grayish black section for the TRACS Help Desk phone number. We also have a TRACS Help Desk email as well. So you'll see that there at the very bottom, we have this 1844 number listed there. So this is the TRACS live system. And again, I got to that by clicking on the quick links, TRACS system. This is where you'll go to enter your actual grant information. We also have a TRACS training environment, which is this second link here. This TRACS training environment is a copy of the live system used just for training and practice. So anything entered into the training environment is not considered real or live information, and it does not go anywhere. So if you do use the training environment, just keep in mind that this information is not transferable to the live system. It is a place where if you have a login to the live system, you can go in and practice and play around and check out the features of TRACS. But just keep in mind the training site is only for training and practice and not for the real data. So if I were to click on this link, it would open up this other page I have open here, which has TRACS and then training in the web address. Once I log in, you're going to see that it pops up this little red box when I first log in at the top here, letting me know I'm not in the live system. I'm just in the TRACS training environment, which is great because I'm going to show you a demo grant that is loosely based on a real grant in the system, but it's not meant to be representational of a real grant. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the sample grant and show you how the performance report steps work. So from the home page for TRACS, make this a little bit bigger, we go into the performance module to enter all of our performance and reporting information. We click performance, opens up the performance dashboard, and from here we click on grants. It might be tempting to click on reports, but the reports tab only opens up a series of national reports. These are not used for reporting on a specific grant, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to go back to my home page and click on performance. So everything is done through the grants module here. We click on grants, and then once we select grants, it opens up the grants list page, and from here we can search for our grant using keywords or the federal award number. And if I scroll down a little bit, I'm going to see all of these sample grants in the system. This is all of this test data that you'll see. There's a bunch of testing stuff in here because we are in the training site. So I'm going to go ahead and search for my demo grant and show you that. So I have a award number I'm going to look for. So I'm just typing in, you can type in part of the keywords of the grant title, or you could type in the award number if you have that and hit the search button or hit enter. And then it's going to narrow down the search, find your grant. Here it is. This is my training demo example grant for 2022 range development study. And I'm going to go ahead and, in this example, the start and end dates might look a little funny, but that's just because I selected an older grant to attach to this award in the training environment. So just don't pay attention to the dates. In the live system, these would be the current dates for the actual 2022 year. Okay. So to get into this grant and work on it, we're going to click on the Work on Grant in the actions over on the right. And I also want to point out we have a really handy feature, the copy button. So next year for 2023, if I get another grant for this range study development and I want to copy my existing grant from last year, I have the option to look it up and copy. So just a nice feature that we do have in TRACS that provides you with a way to start your grant if it's based off of a previous year's grant that you've already entered into the system. So that's a nice feature. We're going to work on this existing grant and click on Work on Grant over on the right. It's going to open up the Work on Grant feature, which opens up that grant process workflow page, which again, I mentioned before in that screenshot I had in the slides. This is the home base for your grant in TRACS, and it has the 4 steps you need to complete your grant in the TRACS system. So in TRACS, we need to complete steps 1, 2, and 3 before we can access step 4, performance reports. So we see those previous steps are green and complete. Step 4 is not started and it's showing in red. So I'm going to start it by clicking the Enter Performance Reports button. And now from here, this opens up the performance reporting list page, and this shows our reporting. It says reporting due dates, but it's really just a listing of the periods of performance. So just keep in mind, whatever this date is, the end date here, you're going to be thinking about 120 days out from that end date is the date when my report is due for a final report, or if I have a multi-year grant with multiple periods of performance listed, then for the interim years, you have 90 days. So just keep that in mind from the end date. TRACS will not send you any email notifications currently about when your report is specifically due, but you should get some notifications from the Grant Solutions system. So these dates are matching what is in Grant Solutions. That's where we get the periods of performance information from. For this example, this is a 1-year grant. And in our example, we're going to pretend like we're kind of back in time, or pretend that these dates are more current. So it's ending in December of 2022, and we're now ready for reporting. You will see the Ready for Reporting button will show as green when it's ready, and that will be after the date has passed. So you can't enter the report during the middle of your period of performance, but you can enter it after that period of performance end date here. So now we're ready, and the objective reports entered shows as no, the questionnaire shows as no, so we need to complete these steps. And we'll see the status shows as report awaiting completion. So we're in draft mode, we're ready to put this in. To go in and start reporting, you're going to click Report on Statements in the actions on the right. Once you click on that, it opens up the performance report summary page. And from here, we can see the period of performance listed at the top. We can see the objective report complete shows as incomplete. The questionnaire shows as incomplete. And we can also see in the table here We have one project statement, so just one box shown. We have here the questionnaire shows in these two bubbles here, these orangish peach colored bubbles show you the current status of your completion of your report. So we have 0 out of 6 questions completed and 0 out of 4 objectives completed. You can start with either order. You can start with answering the questions or start with reporting on the objectives in whichever order you prefer. I'm going to start with reporting on the objectives. So I click on Report on Objectives, and it expands the menu below to show kind of in this drop-down space these 4 objectives. We see each of the 4 in their own box. And starting with the top objective, we have an objective to conduct 8 research investigations to assist states with, and then I can click on those 3 little dots if I want to see the whole thing. So I can kind of read through, okay, that's what that objective was for. The full title shows up here. And then we get a question that shows up, quantifiable result to report for this period, yes or no. So this question is asking us, do we have a unit of measure to put in? Have we conducted any of these research investigations? If we have, if our value is greater than 0, so 1 or above, then we can put in yes and answer that question. If you have an example where maybe for some reason we were not able to conduct any of this research this period, we would say no, and it would ask us to justify and enter an explanation of why we did not conduct the research we had planned. And that's fine to answer no. If that's the case, you will want to justify that and add a reason why, and you can work with your grant specialist if you have questions about that piece. So you'll just answer this honestly. Were you able to have any research conducted? Yes or no? In this example, we're going to say yes. We were able to conduct this research. So we say yes. And then it opens up the activities. So now underneath our objective here, we have the ability to view the activities. We have 0 out of 1 activities complete. So we're going to click Show Activities. And there's a lot of little drop downs and buttons that you'll click through this. So again, if you would like a nice refresher or a nice kind of job aid that walks you through these steps, back on the WSFR training portal, which I'm going to just click back here on this little link real quick, we can always go to our TRACS e-learning courses, look at course 4 for performance reporting. There's a nice manual that walks you through as a job aid step by step. These are the different steps to complete reporting, or you can watch the short video as well. So again, if you get lost in these little steps here, we have some nice resources out there. Okay, so I've clicked on Show Activities, and now I have a new little kind of box here that appears below the objective for the activity. So my activity here is specifically conducting research on recruitment, retention, and reactivation data acquisition and analysis. So I'm going to complete my report for this activity by clicking on the Report on Activity link over on the right. Once I click on that, the specific report page opens. And from here, I'm going to put in my quantitative unit of measure, my metrics for what I have completed during this period of performance. So how many research investigations did I complete? And in this example, we were able to complete 8 investigations. So in the box here, this box is the report on activity box, and it's going to ask you to enter a specific value for the unit of measure. In this example, how many investigations? 8. And you can see at the top here, I have it listed what I was planning to do. And it's very helpful to put in when you are initially creating your objective, the value that you were intending to do. So you can kind of keep track of that. Okay, so we have our number of investigations. We have a spot scrolling down a little bit for geographic location. It's currently listed as DC, but if you wanted to add more detailed locations, you could check this box if this occurred in a specific locale, or you could also describe your location. This says all states. You could add additional details here if you'd like. So you could type in, specifics about that. Scrolling down, there's a spot to put in comments. We don't have any specific comments, so we're just going to go ahead and hit Finished with Activity. And that's all you have to do to complete one activity report is enter that numeric value. And then if there's anything else required on the page, you would fill that out. So now we have all data entered for this activity. And then looking up, we have on the objective level, 1 out of 1 activities is green and complete. And at the very top here, we have 1 out of 4 objectives showing as reported on. So now we can minimize this box by clicking on the little arrow for the objective. And I close that down and then go to the next objective, create one online database of range development case studies. Okay, so we're creating an online database. Were we able to do this? Yes, we're gonna click yes. And now, again, this expands the objective to the activities. We'll click show activities and then select report on activity. I'm just gonna pause there and see if we have any other questions or comments. So I see something from Silvana, a question that might help the applicants. Will TRACS save progress, or do you have to finish all the reports before anything is saved? Will it save if you stop in the middle? So that's a good question. Let's see. I think you'll see that there's some pieces of information that you might have to fill out in order to save, but as we're going through this, let's say you had to step away and you needed to you just completed one objective report, but you needed to step away. It is going to save what you've done so far, and then you can come back in and continue working on it later. Or let's say you have different people working on different objectives. Maybe you have a research group that completed the research objective and someone else who completed something else, and they have access to TRACS to put that in. Different people can work on the report as long as they have access to TRACS and they've been granted those permissions. They can go in and complete their parts of the report and save as they go. So you don't have to complete the whole thing all in one go. It will allow you to save as you go. When you're in a specific activity report page, so here I'm reporting on my database creation, I click on report on activity. When I click on that, when I'm on this page, I think I can just hit finished with activity or save. It's going to just save it kind of in progress, but you'll notice when I hit finished with activity, I haven't filled out anything yet, so it's still showing that there's some missing data. So I'll need to go back in and complete whatever I've missed. The nice thing is TRACS does keep a log of anything that you have missed. So if you come back in, you'll see that there's these kind of, again, peachish colored boxes that tell you where you left off, what you have or haven't finished. And also there's these little missing data pieces that if we click on that, it's going to say, hey, you forgot to put the output value for the performance report. So lots of handy little tips here that show you what you may or may not have missed. So any other questions or anything as we're looking through this? Okay. All right. So we're on our objective to create an online database, and we are going to report on that. So we're going to click report on activity, and then it opens up the specific report page. From here, we're going to go down to the report table and put in how many databases were we able to complete. In this example, we created one database, and we are happy with the geographic location, just statewide. It's in the cloud, as databases usually are. And then we're going to scroll down, activity report comments. We don't have any comments here. We're going to hit finished with activity. And you can put comments in if you'd like and even attach files. But just keep in mind that we are also going to fill out the questionnaire, which will summarize the work there in a narrative format. So I'm going to hit finished with activity here. And now I've put in my quantitative data for my database. I'm going to go ahead and close this objective and move on to the next objective. And again, scrolling back up, now 2 out of 4 objectives are complete. So now I have outreach products that we are working on. So we've had an objective to create 11 outreach products to help the states make the case for expanded target shooting opportunities. So these outreach products that we're creating, we're going to say, yes, we were able to create these outreach products. We're going to say yes. And then we're going to go ahead and hit show activities. And in this example, we actually have 2 activities listed under the objective for outreach. This is because we happen to have done 2 different types of products. We have outreach products of a digital format and also of a print format. So in TRACS, when you were initially setting up your objective, it asks you to identify those activities that you plan to complete. And because we selected both digital products and print products, we get these 2 boxes here. And now we need to report on both of these. So we're going to click over on report on activity for digital products. And then when we report on activity, it opens up the report page. And from here, if for some reason you were not able to complete the print products, but not the digital products, you do have this checkbox here. If you do not have any digital products created, you could check this box and put in an explanation. So maybe something happened and we were not able to complete this, we would put in an explanation. So if I check this box, I could type an explanation, and that would give you credit for completing that part of the report. In this example, I actually do have a quantified result. So I'm going to uncheck the box. And I'm going to put 1 product. We were able to develop a website, a digital product. And now I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Everything looks good here. I'm going to hit finished with activity. And now that I have my quantitative data in for one of the activities, digital products, it shows 1 out of 2 activities complete. So now I'm going to document what we completed for print products. Under print products, I'm going to go ahead and click report on activity. And then for the print products, I'm going to enter how many print products were we able to develop. We were able to develop 10 new brochures on target shooting opportunities. So there's an example of our 10 products. And then I'm going to scroll down and we have same thing with geographic information. That looks fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit finished with activity. And now I've entered the data, the specific metrics for those. So now I show 2 out of 2 activities, and I can now close that. And now I have 3 out of 4 objectives complete. The last objective report is to engage with at least 5 states to identify questions and topics necessary for inclusion. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And for our stakeholder engagement, were we able to complete this? Yes. I'm going to click yes. And just to show you, if you did happen to click no, you might then see that what happens is you get this reporting box asking you for an explanation of why. So if something happened and we were not able to complete this objective, this is where you would put in your explanation here. And that would give you credit for the why this happened. So let's see. Stakeholder meetings canceled due to pandemic or something, So as an example, you would have an example there, and then why we might have canceled something or not held that yet. And then that would give you credit if you scroll up to the top for completing that objective. In this example, I'm actually going to go ahead and take that out. I'm going to clear this. I'm going to click clear objective, this red button. And what that does is it just wipes out what I put in there. So I put this in an error. I would click clear objective. It's going to say, hey, are you really sure you want to delete what you put in? If you are sure, and it's just for this one objective, you will retype in clear data in uppercase. It will tell you what to do. And then it will say this operation cannot be undone. So you only want to clear the data on an objective if you really want to start over. In this case, let's say I do, I will type in clear data and click the clear data button. It just refreshes it, removes what I put in, and it gives me the question again. Do you have a quantifiable result to report? Yes or no? In this case, I'm going to actually say yes instead of no. And now it's going to pop up with the activity report. I can click report on activity. And then I can put in how many states were we able to engage with. We were actually able to engage with 7 states. We had planned for 5, but we were actually able to get 7 states involved. So we'll put in the number of organizations. And then I'm happy with that. So I'm going to click finished with activity. Oh, and I see a nice question. If you are reporting on digital products, should the recipient include web links to the digital products? That would be I think that would be a nice way to do it, a nice best practice to include web links to those digital products, because that does highlight to the service and shows them the link to the actual digital platform that you created. So that would be a nice place to put it. And I'll show you actually a good place to put that link. So let me scroll back up. We have now completed the 4 objective reports that quantified data the actual metrics that we were able to complete. So now that we've done that, it shows 4 out of 4 objective reports done. We now have 0 out of 6 questions we need to complete. So I'm going to click Answer Questions at the top here to complete the questionnaire. The questionnaire opens up on a separate window here. And on this window, we now have those 6 questions that I showed you on that original slide shown here. And you'll notice in these boxes, it does not show any word count or word limit. So you can add as much content as you like. It looks like the box is limited, but when you click in a box to answer a question, you'll see that it expands it out. And just like you've seen in probably other parts of TRACS, we have this nice narrative box, which has some formatting options at the top here and the ability to add hyperlinks, etc. So this would be a nice place to add, for example, a link to that website as one of the things that you want to share for the accomplishments of this grant. So for question 1, again, this question was, what progress has been made towards completing the objectives of the project? So let's say I want to type in some information here, and let's say I have it on a nice Word document that I want to use. Let's see, I might have a template somewhere that I could copy and paste from. I'm going to go ahead and paste a little narrative write-up that I have about what we were able to accomplish. And again, this is one thing that pops up. If you do copy and paste from a Word document, it's going to say, would you like to keep the format or clean it up? We usually recommend clicking clean just to clean up any weirdness with the formatting. So if I click clean, it'll still keep you any original formatting that you have as far as underlines, bolds, things like that, but it cleans up any weird spacing or any other issues usually. So we recommend clicking clean. And in this comment, what I have here is a summary of the progress made towards completing those 4 objectives of the project. So I have actually the 4 objectives broken down here. And this is just the way that I happen to have done this, but this is an example of typically how an organization might do this. You might do this as just as an example breakdown of each of those objectives with a nice summary narrative of what you completed. And here a nice website example of what you were able to do for your digital product with a link. And this link copied over from the Word document that I had, or I could also use at the top here these little formatting tools to insert a link. So I'm going to close that, and I'm happy with the way that that looks. So now I can go down to question 2. Please describe and justify any changes in the implementation of your objectives and approaches. And let's say at this point I needed to step away from my desk. If I did that and I happen to, need to step away, you can click Save Questionnaire at the bottom. It's just going to save your progress so far. And now you'll see 1 out of 6 questions are complete. So I still know I need to go back in here and complete the other 5 questions. And there is a question, are these 6 questions for all objectives or for each objective individually? And these are for all objectives. So this is a summary of all of the work you've done in your project. So going back in to answer those questions, what progress has been made towards completing the objectives of the project? If you have more than one objective, you'll do a summary of all of those here. And the way that I have this done in here is I just broke it down by specific objective. And then you could also write up more of like a summary statement as well. So different ways to do that. Question 2, please describe and justify any changes in the implementation of your objectives or approaches. If we had any changes or anything unexpected, we could put that in here. So as an example, I might put in, we were able to engage with seven state organizations through our stakeholder involvement sessions. When we had originally planned to engage with 5 organizations, something like that. So that expanded our scope a little bit. And you'll see it does have some nice formatting things. So if I happen to misspell something when I'm typing it in, it will give you all those nice formatting things that you get in Word. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I have now a little description of what might have changed compared to what I was originally planning to do. And then question 3 If applicable, please share if the project resulted in any unexpected benefits, etc. So if it did, you could type it in here. If it's not applicable, you can check the box. In my example, I have something I wanted to paste in here. So I'm going to go ahead and paste some information about some of the benefits that we learned from doing this project. And then once I have that in there, I can scroll down. For question 4, for the survey project, for surveys only, if applicable, does this continue work from a previous grant? This does not, so we're going to check not applicable, but if it did, you could type in your information here and answer to this question, how the results compare to results from a previous grant or from a previous study. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and check the box. And you will see there are attachment boxes under each of these questions if you do have additional attachments to add. A great place to add attachments would be for question 4. If you have additional tables, figures, graphs. Question 5 also is a great place to add attachments. So this is, if applicable, identify and attach selected publications, photographs, screenshots of websites or other documentation, including articles and popular literature, scientific literature, other public information and outreach products. If you have some great things that you've generated out of this project that you'd like to highlight, this would be a great place to attach that type of documentation or put in links. You could do that in the comments box and then also attach files. So as an example, I might say, see the attached range report summary highlighting the technical insights, best practices, and reference resources for this project. And then I'm going to attach that report by clicking the View Attach Files button here, link. When you click on View Attach Files, it gives you the upload option. From here, you can upload an attachment. And you will notice there is some helpful information at the top about what you should or should not attach in TRACS. So when you are working with attachments, just keep in mind compliance documentation such as NEPA, Section 7, etc., should not be uploaded into TRACS. So if it's compliance related, that needs to go into Grant Solutions. You don't need to put it in both places. Just keep in mind that stuff goes in Grant Solutions. Also, you do not want to attach documentation that contains sensitive, personally identifiable information or PII unless it's redacted. So if you have anything that's a public domain, and it has, let's say your work email, your organization, your business phone number, and your title, that's okay to have in there. You just want to leave out any personal information, personal email, personal phone number, personal address, social security, dates of birth, bank information, etc. Anything that's more of a personal nature, that should be redacted. If you're working with uploading documentation such as a publicly created report or outreach products, typically those will already be vetted for any PII. But just keep that in mind. If you do have something with PII, you'll want to redact it first. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my file by clicking the Choose File button. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and find on my desktop my range report or wherever I put it and add it in. And then I'm going to select the attachment type. So here's where you have a variety of different attachment types you can put in for the performance report. Let's see, this is maybe publication or research data. You can see it might even include a master's or PhD thesis or other product, species survey, stocking report. You have a variety of different options. I'm going to call this just a publication. And then I'm going to click on the upload button. It uploads this document, puts it, tags it as for the performance report, a publication that we're showing here. I can remove it, delete it, or edit as needed. Otherwise, I can also add additional documents. You have to upload each attachment separately, so just keep that in mind. We'll upload, if we have another document to upload, we'll click Upload Attachment and choose File. And then let's say for the second document I want to attach here, I have maybe a nice photo or something else that I'd like to attach. So let's see, sample attachments. Maybe I have a really nice conservation journal article I wanted to attach, or a sample table of some kind, or some nice photographs. Maybe I'll attach that photograph. And then I'll put in, what is this? This is a photo. Let's see, a project picture. And then I'll scroll down and hit upload. And now I have a couple of different documents shown here. I'm happy with the documents I have uploaded, and I'm going to go ahead and close this. So then moving on, I have the last question. Is this a project you wish to highlight for communication purposes? Yes or no? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And I could maybe put a comment in if I'd like. This is a project that highlights the done with partners in improving range access nationwide, something like that. Whatever I'm putting in here, we're really proud of this. This is highlighting some important work that we're doing. We're going to go ahead and say, yes, we are comfortable with sharing this with the service, with communications that might go out. And we're going to close that and just say a little comment on that. And that looks good. So now that's pretty much everything for the report. And let's see. Yes. So so we have some nice comments here. I see Ryan answered Lori's question. Yes. Question 5 is a great place where the recipient might attach links to digital products produced after the award. So this would be also a good place to put in a link. So you could also say, also see the website developed for this project here. And then you could have your sample awesomeness.com. There we go. And then close that. Okay. And let's see. Another comment. I see Sylvana said it was tricky for entering grants, drop downs and scroll down, or it will show as incomplete if you don't select the right attachment category. Yes. So Sylvana brings up a good point. It is very important to select the right attachment type. So when I did that, I might have done that a little bit quickly. So when you click on the attach files option, you can click view attached files, optional. And then when you do upload an attachment using the upload button, you'll want to make sure when you do, after you choose a file, and let's say pick something here, you can make sure the descriptive name looks good, because sometimes you save an image and it just says image, whatever the date is. You might want to update that to a better name. And then for the attachment type, this is where it's very important to pick the right attachment type, because that can really help us especially when you have a lot of attachments, to know what specifically this is. So for example, is this upfront in the original grant, when you entered that to begin with, you will have put in the grant indirect costs PDF as an example. For the performance report, you might say specifically what it is. There is an option for other if none of these apply, but you can just select what best fits. And that's a good way to just tie it together so we know what these attachments are. I'm going to go ahead and close that.
Yona?
Yes.
Just to follow up to that one, on the reporting side, you won't get an error that says that the report is incomplete, however, if you put in any of the attachment types, correct?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't give you an error. So as long as you select some type of, so that's where the system isn't smart enough to know what this is that you've attached. So just make sure that you're being careful with your selection, that you're picking the right attachment type here.
Hey,
But it
Yona,
will give you an error if you don't fill that out. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had a comment.
Sure.
So it will give you an error if if it says that put the publication attachment here, and you go and choose some kind of budget attachment instead of the publication attachments. It can be like report, PhD, whatever it is. If it's under the right category, I think it will work. What happened with the grant was that people did not scroll down to the indirect cost and
Right.
clicked under the budget, clicked other, and it wouldn't accept it. And they were like, but we uploaded it. Why is it incomplete? Why it doesn't accept it? It was just because it wasn't the indirect cost that they were expecting from you, and it was under others.
Right.
So if you go and pick other under the budget, I believe it's not going to accept it. It has to be under the reports or publications.
Yes. Correct. So, okay, so let me save this questionnaire. We just go ahead and save here. And I just want to point out what Sylvana is specifically talking about, so you can see this in the grant. I'm going to use the little we call these breadcrumbs here at the top of the page to kind of move my way back through the workflow. What I have so far has saved, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to go back to the grant workflow page by clicking back on this grant workflow link. And that takes me back to that home base for the grant. What Silvana was mentioning here is under step 1, sometimes this will show up as yellow or orange and incomplete and or in progress because there's something missing. And that's usually because the attachment type for the indirect cost is missing. That's a very common one. If we click on Edit Awarded Grant Information under step 1, and we go to additional information, you may run into this where the attachment type, so this is the indirect cost statement here at the bottom of the page, this needs to be uploaded specifically to the indirect cost statement type. If you don't select that type as the attachment type, it's not going to give you credit for completing this step. So this is the one place in the app where it's very specific and it has to have the correct attachment type or it will give you an error message. So as an example, just looking at the attached files here, this indirect cost statement was uploaded here and it was linked to the indirect cost statement. So this is a common troubleshooting thing. You might run into this when you go back into your grant. If I remove this from the field or just remove it altogether and close out of there and save, you're going to notice that, let's see, oh, no, that one. Okay, let me just remove it altogether. Let's see, that one didn't work. Okay, so what she's talking about here is if you upload the attachment, so let's say I have my attachment of my indirect cost statement, I've saved it to my computer, and I'm ready to upload it. If I close this guy down and I upload it, so I go to View Attached Files and I upload the attachment, I'm going to choose my file and I'm going to find my indirect cost statement. The attachment type here, it's really important to not put this under the budget. Under Other, you really want to scroll down to Grant Indirect Cost and make sure it's linked to your Grant Indirect Cost PDF attachment. Click on that and we upload this document and then close. What this does is it does put it to the right document. If I had not selected that particular example or that particular type, it would show as incomplete. So in the live system, you're going to see, you might run into this where you go into your grant and you find that step 1 is not green and complete. You might want to just troubleshoot that and check to make sure that under step 2, at the bottom of the page, your attachment type is showing as the grant indirect cost PDF. That's a good troubleshooting tip because that is a really common thing to find when you go back into your grant to work on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that and save out of here. And we were back in step 4. So I'm going to scroll down and go back into the performance report by clicking Enter Reports. We'll see that this is now orange and in progress. When I click Enter Performance Reports, I can now see, because I've completed everything, I'm showing with a really nice green and complete all the way through, objective reports entered, and performance questionnaire complete. So that's what we want to see. And I do see, let me go back into the report here. I do see a question showing from Lori, if the service wants to highlight a project, would the recipient get a heads up? So I think she's talking about under the questionnaire here. Question 6, is this a project you wish to highlight for communications purposes? So the point of this question is if the service is looking for projects that highlight certain types of work done, maybe they're looking for great examples of range development out there. They might look for range development grants and see which ones happen to have this flag. Yes, if it says yes, then a best practice is for the service to contact the grant recipients and to get more information and see what we would like to share. That is a best practice, but in terms of what the system does, it just flags it with a yes, so that if the service did want to follow up, they would know this would be one that the recipients would be open to. Does that answer your question?
Yona, I'd jump in
Yeah.
quickly on that, and I agree with everything you said. I mean, the system flags it for us, and then long term, what would happen is then somebody in the service would reach out to you. Likely, there would be a bit more information needed about the project before it's just automatically routed for some sort of communication effort. So you could anticipate that there'd be some correspondence from the service on that particular topic.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And so while I'm here, any other questions or anything else you'd like to see in the performance reporting? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this questionnaire. And I just want to show you, in this example, I now have these things complete. So I'm going to click back to reporting due dates by clicking the back button or using the breadcrumbs at the top. And now I'm back on this reporting due dates page. I have everything complete. It's now in the status awaiting non-federal review and approval. So at this point, the TRACS system will send an email to your non-federal approver, Silvana. She'll go in and she'll do her approvals. And then later on, your federal approvers will complete the federal side of the approval process. So just like on the front end of TRACS, when you initially put in your grant proposal and project statements, it goes through two-stage approvals by non-federal and federal approvers. And then on the back end, when you get to performance reporting, same thing happens. There's again another approval process where the performance report goes through approvals by your non-federal and federal approvers. So once that's done and approved, if I click my back button again, step 4 will be green and complete. So the approval process has to be done, has to show as green in order for step 4 to be shown as completely green and complete. And then at that point, everything is completed in TRACS for your performance report once this is green and complete. And then what you could do is you could download the report if you'd like. So if you click again, enter performance reports, you can view the final performance report. And ideally, you would download this after it's received final approval. So if the status shows final approved, then it's been stamped by both non-federal and federal approvals. Once it shows final approved and it's green and complete on the previous page, you can click View Performance Report, Final Performance Report to download the PDF. You could download this earlier, but we would just recommend you wait till it's final approved. When you click View Final Performance Report, it opens the PDF. So this is the PDF on a separate tab, which is a summary of everything that's been done, and it includes all the information you put into the performance report, including the public description you initially put into the grant when you first put in the grant proposal, a award accomplishment summary table, and then all of the answers to your questions, which are fully expanded here on the window. There's also an attachments box, which shows links to the attachments. The attachments themselves, because they could be quite lengthy, do not show up in the PDF itself, so that they are shown as links, which can be viewed or downloaded as needed. We also have the quantitative reports, which are going to be those specific objective activity reports, and all that information and the data, the quantitative values shows on the page. So this document is the master document for your performance report. You would then download or print it as needed using the icons in the upper right. If you download it, you can then upload it into Grant Solutions later on, and we'll show you where that goes. And okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that guy. And that's our steps here. And there is a question, how long does it usually take for progress report approval? And will we get an email notification based on when it has been approved? That's a great question. And the approvals process, it really depends on your approval staff and what they're working through. But typically they will get an email letting you know that there's something waiting for their approval. And you can follow up with them if you're waiting on something, but usually I don't think it takes too terribly long. Mike or anybody, do you want to chime in on that piece?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the approvals process, since these are all driven by by people, so once it goes in and it's submitted for that federal approver, then it goes over for review and approval at that stage. So there can be some time in between each of those steps, but typically once that approval or once the report is submitted, people review it pretty quickly to get it through that final approval stage. So I guess there's not a surefire number of days that you can anticipate, but hopefully as soon as possible.
One thing I think I'll add to that as well. So, the question might come up if you have a due date in Grant Solutions, and you're concerned about whether or not the TRACS report will be fully approved before that, go ahead and upload the awaiting report so that you can meet your grant solutions deadline. I think in a perfect world, we would have everything approved going into grant solutions, but we realize that things happen, life happens. So don't feel that it has to be the final all the way full and miss your due date because of it.
Okay, yes, thanks. Thanks, Mike and Heidi. Great comments. Okay, so one more thing I just wanted to show you is just what it looks like when you have a table for multiple periods of performance. So just to show you what this would look like, I'm just going to pull up a different demo grant. And in this different demo grant, this one example here happens to have 2 periods of performance. So in this example, this is one that it's a 2-year grant, or as another example, you might have a 3-year, 5-year, whatever your time frame is. For each period of performance, these will display in the table and a report will be due for each one. So just keep that in mind when you are working through on a multi-year grant or a grant that has multiple periods of performance. You will have a report due that includes the objective report for that year and the questionnaire as well that you'll need to complete each time. And each report for each period goes through that 2-stage of approval. And once you've completed the whole grant and all of the reports for each period of performance, and those have been approved, then you get that green and complete for step 4 in TRACS. So just a caveat for multi-year. Okay. So again, if you're working through this and you're looking at all the little steps and you get lost, we do have some great handouts and materials in our e-learning courses out on our WSFR training portal. Okay, so any other questions or anything else TRACS related? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you, Mike.
Great job, Yona. Thank you very much. And certainly if you have any other questions that you think of before the end of the webinar, we certainly will have some time here at the end. So let me share my screen. And Yona, can you give me a verbal thumbs up that you are able to see this in presentation mode?
Yes, looks good.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right. Well, again, thank you to Yona for all the trainings that she has done over the years. Now that TRACS is live, we're kind of at this exciting time. We recently had our annual TRACS working group meeting for the first time in person since before COVID started, and we're now at a point where we have data in the system, and this is really what we all as a partnership have been looking forward to be able to have some reporting metrics that can fill in one piece of that bigger picture communication piece of the Fish and Wildlife Service, the WSFR program, and these WSFR administered programs. So it's very exciting, and Yona, your efforts and Debbie with the help desk has really played a big part in getting people to that stage. So thank you very much. Another thing that before we get started here in Grant Solutions, I really need to thank a couple of our state partners who generously have provided some screenshots that you'll be seeing as I walk through this part of the presentation here today. One of the challenges that we've had since Department of Interior mandated that Grant Solutions be the grants management platform for all DOI administered programs is that the way that the system is set up, there's the recipient side, and then there's also the federal side. And while there's aspects of the system that work pretty well, one of the challenges that we found is that on the federal side, we can't necessarily see what the recipients are seeing. And so that creates an issue when questions come in from time to time. So in order to present this presentation on the webinar today, we graciously had the help of 2 of our state partners who have provided some of these screenshots. So just want to give them an anonymous recognition and thank you before we get started here. So as Yona had pointed out, we generate our performance report in TRACS, and it spits out a PDF that we could then bring into Grant Solutions and upload that as the official record of reporting for that particular grant during that particular performance reporting period. Now, Grant Solutions is a role-based system, so if you have access to it for your organization, all of your details are specific to both the role that you have and for your organization. So what you see here on the screen is once you've been logged into the system and you've selected your particular award that you're going to be reporting on or taking some grant administrative action on within Grant Solutions. Now, if you had more than one particular grant award, you would see these listed out in Grant Solutions after you've logged in. But what you see here is you could call it the landing page for this particular grant award. And we'll point out some of these key features here on this landing page. So you'll see this federal award identification number. It might be referred to as the FBMS number, but this is that unique identifier that's only related to your particular award. You could think of this like your grant social security number. It's unique to that award, and it will not there will not be another grant with that same award either before or after this particular award. So that's one of the key features we see at the top of the page here. Whatever your current approved budget is, this will be highlighted here. And you'll note as we go through some of these screenshots, we've blacked out some of the information from our state partners that, again, were generous enough to provide these screenshots. So you'll see your current total approved budget here. Scrolling down, you'll see the grant program in the example we're looking at here, basic wildlife restoration or basic hunter education and wildlife restoration, I should say. So if you were logging into Grant Solutions to go through one of your reports under the multi-state, this grant program would be listed as Multi-State Conservation Grant Program. Now, as you scroll over to the middle of the page, you'll see that there's several tabs that you can click on that have various information, whether it's details about the grant, a history of actions that have occurred on this particular award, any amendments that have been submitted, or any notes that have been submitted on this particular grant. But what we're going to focus on here today is this middle checkbox, the reports. So if you click on reports, it takes you to a report dropdown. You'll note here that for this particular award, that is a multi-year award. If you look at the current budget period up here, it goes from 2014 through 2022. So in this case, there is a total of 20 reports during the current life cycle of this grant that would be submitted. Next, you'll see over on the right that there are drop-down arrows that relate to the available reports. So you'll note that there's a past reporting periods and then current reporting periods. Now, if you were to click on the drop-downs for past reporting periods, that's how you'll actually get into the reports that are available for you to enter in the system. And we just want to clarify that past reports isn't meaning that your report is past due. It's that this particular period of performance within the award has passed, and now you are able to report on that particular award for that period. So if you click on the past reporting periods dropdown, you'll see here that you've now opened up your possible reports that you could complete. And here you have two reports on this particular screen, the annual federal financial report in this first line, and then the annual PPR, the periodic performance report in the second line. So you'll see that there's the reporting periods indicated, and then the status of the report. In the case of the financial report, it has not been started. In the annual performance report, it has been accepted. So if you were first logging into Grant Solutions, to submit that performance report that Yona showed you how to generate out of TRACS, it would also look like it does on this first line, that the status is not started, and your available actions would be to start that report. So if we were to imagine that it was actually this blue button here, we would click on Start Report for the performance report, and that'll take us into the screens that allow us to complete that performance reporting submission, that formal submission here in Grant Solutions using the PDF that we've generated in TRACS. So I realize that some of these fields are a little bit difficult to see. And when we move on to the financial report, you'll see these fields again. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on each of them here on this screen, but we want to give you an idea of what this is actually going to look like when you log into the system to upload your performance report in Grant Solutions. You'll also note on this particular page that all of these fields are locked. Again, that this is a role-based system. So once you've logged into Grant Solutions and you've selected a particular award to report on, it's going to auto-populate a lot of this information for you based on the grant that you have selected. So one way that the system makes the reporting side of things a little bit easier here in Grant Solutions. So if you were to scroll down further when you were logged into the system, this is what you're seeing on the screen for this next set of screenshots. You'll see in box 9, this is really the meat of where we're putting in that performance report. You'll see that there is an area to add any explanations or additional information that may be helpful to that federal awarding agency. But you'll also note that there's only 2,000 characters here. So this is really just a high-level summary if you wanted to include this information here. In most cases, you're going to be uploading an attachment from TRACS in this case. And so you could also just enter up in this type section, see attached report. So moving down the line here, you'll see that you can click on this blue button to choose a file to upload. So presumably by this point, you've saved your PDF someplace on your desktop or My Documents from TRACS. And you click this button, it'll open a dialog box where you navigate to that particular folder to open and click to upload. Additionally, you can see here underneath the blue button, you could also just have a file window open and simply drag and drop that file attachment into this area, and that would also complete that upload process for your performance report. Moving on here, we have the certification area. So by checking this box, you are signing and certifying to the best of your knowledge that this report is correct and complete for the performance report. And then you'll see here again, because we've blacked some of this out for privacy information, but once you're logged into the system, it would show your role-based information here, your agency, your name, and your contact information. As we continue down here, by typing in your full name, this acts as your electronic signature on this report. And again, you have signed and certified and checked this box that the information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. And once you type your name in here, this gray button where it says Submit Report Below would become blue. And that's the final act to click that button to formally submit that report in Grant Solutions. So if we find ourselves back at that past reporting stage, once you click that button to submit, it would be then that the status would change here under that performance report to accepted. And that's how you can verify that your report was in fact accepted. So I'll pause here to see if there's any questions on the performance reporting process. So that's the complete life cycle that we want to show you for these multi-state grants for the performance reporting side, where you're generating those report PDFs in TRACS, and then it makes it easy to just drag and drop that information into Grant Solutions to complete that cycle. So any questions on the performance piece? All right. So hearing none, we'll move right along here. So again, you're still on this past reporting periods. And if we're going to look at the financial report, and so we're not focused on performance anymore, we're strictly going to look at the expenditures under this particular award. So you'll click Start Report, and then this will launch you into a new dialogue, an entire new page. And again, we've grabbed these screenshots from a state partner, but if you were in the system, you would be scrolling down this web page to enter all of this information on your particular award. All right, so I had mentioned earlier on that smaller screenshot in the performance reporting section that we would go through some of this information in a little bit more detail here. And so now that it's blown up, we'll take a closer look at some of this. Again, you'll see that a lot of this information on these first two sections here are auto-populated, again, based on your organization and login and the grant that you have selected. So line one, the grant issuing organization, Department of Interior. So all of our Fish and Wildlife Service programs fall within the Department of Interior. That's why you see that there. If you happen to get awards from another federal agency under a different department, then in that particular grant that you had selected, you would see some other department. The grant number, again, referencing that federal award identification number, like your grant's social security number, that's unique for this report and this particular grant. You'll see the organization name and address, all auto-populated, again, based on the user login. Then lines 4A and 4B are a couple things to point out. The DUNS number is that entity identifier that all organizations have to identify them when receiving federal financial assistance. But this DUNS number recently transitioned to a unique entity identifier, or UEI, if I can get it correct. And so when you log into Grant Solutions, this DUNS number will now be replaced with that unique entity identifier. Now, this is different than what is on 4B. This is the employer identification number, or it might be commonly called the tax ID number. So these are two separate numbers that you have for each particular organization. Moving on here, we have an optional field, the account number or the recipient identifier. If you, by chance, have something that you call this particular award that's different than this federal award identification number, you could enter that here on line 5. For reporting type, this depends on what stage of your grant you are at. If this is the final report that you are entering, it would be automated because this is what you selected. But if you happen to be entering an interim annual report, this would be selected as annual again. And again, this is a locked field based on the report that you have selected that you wanted to initiate reporting on. Line 7 here is the basis for accounting. And so essentially this depends on your organization's accounting system. And the difference between these two is represented by when a transaction is recorded in your accounting system. So if your organization operates on a cash basis, you are listing out those expenditures when a vendor is actually paid or when revenue is actually received by your agency. So you could think of this as the actual exchange of funds for goods or services under a particular award. But accrual is different because the expenses in this case are accounted for when they're committed to by the agency, but they haven't necessarily been paid to a vendor. So perhaps you're entering a contract with a vendor for goods and services under your award, but you haven't paid those contracts out in full yet. If you are operating on an accrual basis, those would be hitting the books the moment that you were committed to those expenses. Now, finally, there's sometimes, and when I was in the state, my agency had features of both cash and accrual. And if you find your organization has characteristics of both, in those cases, you would select cash. All right, the last two boxes here, again, auto-populated. It's the project period or the grant period. On line 8, this is showing the entire duration of your award, which may be 1 year or it may be more than 1 year. And then line 9 is the reporting end date. So this is representing what the cumulative amount of whether or not you're giving the cumulative expenditures for the entire duration of the award, or just maybe the first 2 years based on the reporting period end date for that particular reporting period.
So
all right,
Mike,
so next, sure, go ahead.
Sorry to jump in. There is a comment or a question related to the period of performance reporting periods, that some folks may have delinquent reports from prior performance periods that haven't been completed? Do you know if the recipient is going to get a notice of these when they log into Grant Solutions?
That's a great question. And my recollection is, and I apologize, I don't have a screenshot for this specifically, but it would show that a report was past due. So it wouldn't necessarily be indicated in here once you're into a particular report submission, but on that summary of the reports available, if there was one that was late, it would be indicated there and show how many days past due that particular report was. So hope that answers, I think that answers the question, hopefully.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so as we move on here, box 10 is really when we get into the meat of the financial reporting data. And we'll walk through each of these sections individually. But I also want to point out that if you happen to have multiple sub-accounts under a grant or maybe multiple lines of funding within ASAP, all of these lines are cumulative based on the funds obligated. And so when I say sub-account, we have the three different pots of multi-state money. There's the traditional wildlife multi-state funds, there's the traditional sport fish restoration funds, and then also the new modern, as we call it, the R3 multi-state pot of money. And so while those may all be funding one particular grant in certain scenarios, because they're all individual sub-accounts, they would have different lines in ASAP. So the important point to take home here is that these costs that you're going to be looking at here, all of these numbers are represented at the grant level and not broken down by sub-account. And we'll show you later on how you would report on those specific breakdowns. So first here, what we'll look at is the top boxes, the federal cash, lines 10A through 10C. And this is speaking only to the federal funds under the award. Now, specifically, the cash receipts means the funds that have been drawn down or reimbursed potentially from ASAP. So that is the funds that have been brought in to your agency's routed banking accounts from ASAP, that automated standard application for payments. So the next line is your line B, or 10B, excuse me, are the cash disbursements. So what this is saying is of those cash receipts those funds that you have brought into your agency's accounts from ASAP, how much of those federal funds have been paid out for eligible activities under the award? Now, you then will see if you move down to the cash on hand on line C, it's just a simple subtraction formula based on what was the cash receipts brought in, and then of those federal funds, what has been paid out for those eligible activities under an award. Now, there could be a scenario where you're doing an interim report where there could be a positive value in line 10C, this cash on hand. But it's important to point out that by the end of the grant period, when you're submitting that final report, that there should not be cash on hand. All of the federal funds that have been brought into the agency need to be spent on those eligible grant activities. So with financial assistance, you're doing a project at cost and you're not able to retain excess funds that weren't used on a project in your organization's bank account. So this is one way that the federal awarding agency can do some light monitoring of a recipient under these awards to ensure that there aren't funds being retained at the end of a particular project. All right, so moving down, again, we're on both of these first sections going from lines 10A through 10H. We're just focused on the federal expenditures. We'll look at the non-federal share or that recipient match on a later screen. So on line 10D, this is auto-populated from ASAP. So this is the total funds that are authorized on the award. So again, what are the federal dollars in one or more sub-accounts that are obligated to this particular award? On 10E, this is the amount of federal funds that have been expended through the ending date of this particular reporting period. So this would include those drawdowns that have been made from ASAP. On line 10F, we have the federal share of unliquidated obligations. So what this would be an example of is a part of the federal share of a contract that has not yet been paid. So if there's going to be some portion of the federal share that's going to pay that vendor, that would be reported here, but it's also indicating that the payment hasn't specifically been made yet. On line 10G, then we have the total funds that have been spent or committed. So showing you the sum of lines 10E and 10F. And so again, this is auto calculated based on the information that you have provided in those prior lines. Then next on line H, we have the unobligated balance of federal funds. And so you'll see here that this is taking the total obligated or authorized funds from line D, subtracting out your total federal share of line G, and that's essentially giving you your remaining balance of what you see there in ASAP. Oops, we'll move on here. So next we'll move on to the recipient share, or you may think of this as your non-federal matching section. So line I, you are entering what is the total non-federal match required under your award. So again, you would want to refer back to your notice of award and enter in this amount of non-federal match required to complete the project that was awarded under your approved proposal and approved budget. Line 10J is, we like to call this in training branch, the dumping ground or the kitchen sink for all of your recipient non-federal match expenditures. So this could be direct personnel expenses or other expenditures that are made under the award that aren't coming from the federal funds, but those non-federal matching funds from your agency. If your award has in-kind match, those third-party volunteer contributions under an award that don't have a specific cash value, but are valued under an award, those would also be included here. If you had some third-party revenue coming in, a cash donation perhaps, this could be included here on line 10J as well. And this would also include any overmatch. So anything in excess of what was originally anticipated, but was a part of the project to get that done to achieve the goals and objectives that were proposed. So really just saying here that while this is one number here listed on line 10J, it may be coming from a number of different sources that's representing that non-federal match on the award. So again, here on line 10K, the system will auto calculate the difference between line 10I and 10J. And I want to point out here that while this could be a positive value here in line 10K, that's not to indicate that you owe the federal government money. It's just indicating that through the course of the grant, there's still additional match to be provided on that particular award. And by the time you reach that final performance report, then that number should be 0, representing that you've completed the project and spent all the funds and also provided the match requirement on your particular award. Next, we'll move down to this program income section in the next 4 lines. And I don't believe that program income is a big player in the multi-state grant program, but just a quick overview of what this is. So a program income being a revenue that's generated from a grant-funded activity earned by the non-federal entity or the recipient or subrecipient in the case of these multi-state conservation grant programs, and also that revenue is earned during the period of performance. So we're not going to spend any time specifically on this section, but if you do have program income on your award, feel free to reach out to us afterwards, and we'd be happy to walk through the specifics of what that looks like on the financial report. All right, likewise, if you have indirect expenses on your award, there's a whole separate section to enter this information. And I want to point out that this indirect expense is related to your federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement that you may have gone through the process to negotiate with your federal cognizant agency. So this indirect expense is different than just what an organization might consider their general overhead. Now, some of that overhead may be included into your indirect cost rate, but we just want to clarify that there's a process that you would go through to obtain that rate. So if you have an indirect expense to add, you would click this blue button to add an expense, and it'll take you to this pop-up window that you'll see here on the next slide. So the first screen that you have here is your indirect cost rate type. You'll see that there's a drop down that you would select, and some examples of this would be a fixed rate or predetermined rate, or the 10% de minimis. Again, it's really important that you're referring back to your documentation from your federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. This is where you're going to find all of the information that you're populating here in A through F. Next, you would enter the rate for this particular indirect cost rate period. So it could be any number, it just depending on what was negotiated and approved in your negotiated indirect cost rate. So 24.36, for an example, is one that comes to mind, as that was our rate when I was in the state years ago. Next, you'll see that there's a period for your rate. And so again, you want to be referring to your indirect cost rate documentation to see what is the period covered for this rate. This may be different than your project period or the period of performance for a particular award. So we just want to make sure that there's not confusion, that those need to match up exactly. So you could have a scenario where you have only a 1-year grant, but depending on how your indirect cost rates are structured and in that period is, you could have more than one rate within a 1-year grant. And you'll actually be able to see that once we get through this slide here. Next, you have the base amount. So you're entering the amount of expenditures under the award that are subject to that indirect cost rate. So again, you'll want to refer to your documentation to see what types of expenses would be assessed here in this base amount. Common examples of this would be personnel salaries, salaries infringed, or modified total direct costs. So again, we can't stress enough, you really need to refer back to your specific rate documentation to make sure that you have the appropriate information and amounts being included here. Line E calculates the rate, the percentage that you've entered up here on line B, times D, the base amount of indirect expense that you have entered. And then that gives you your total amount of indirect that was charged to this particular award. Then finally here on F, you have the indirect amount that was reimbursed. So that federal share. And just to clarify, it may not be reimbursed at that point, but what is the federal share of that indirect rate that's been charged to the award? So it could be that you are doing, say, 75%, 25% split if that was your cost share that was approved under the award, but it doesn't have to mirror that cost share percentage either. It could be that a particular organization is using all of their indirect costs as match. So you're just representing in dollars what the federal share of those indirect costs might be. So here, once you click the Done button on that indirect cost rate entry, you'll see that in this case, for this example, this organization under this award had 2 separate indirect cost rates that were covering this period, one of 18.74% and then another of 23.8%. And you can see that all of this information that was entered on the previous slide is detailed here. And down in G, it gives you the sum total of all of the indirect expenses on this particular award. So next we'll move down to the remarks section. So if there was additional information that was necessary for the federal awarding agency to understand the information submitted here, you could start typing that here. Again, 2,000 character limit. So if there's something that's more lengthy, you would navigate to this upload box down here or drag and drop that information into this area. So just an example of some things you might want to add in those remarks. If you did have a lot of different funding sources coming in that were going to line 10J as part of That non-federal match, you could add that in these remarks, or you may want to attach a file there. And I also spoke earlier to those different sub-accounts that we have under the multi-state grant program. And so if you do have a grant that involves multiple sub-accounts, while all of the numeric information that we've looked at so far is reported cumulatively at that grant level, you could provide that breakdown here in a table and upload that attachment here. Moving on here, again, similar to the performance report, you are checking the box to certify that all of the information submitted is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. You, again, would see once you've logged in that your information, your email, and your contact information is all included here. And then you are typing your full name, and this is acting as an electronic signature for this financial report. And then that button would become blue that you can submit the report. And that is how you complete the financial report for your particular award. So with that, that's all we have for our formal presentation, but we're happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Move you guys back over here. Hopefully I didn't put everyone to sleep. All right, any questions more broadly that beyond just financial report or going back to anything that you may have thought of for TRACS? All right.
Mike, Mike, this is Ryan. I wonder, could you speak a little bit? We just want to make certain, and I know it's complex. It seems like a lot of steps, particularly as we're still new with TRACS and everything. But Mike, I was wondering, could you just speak real briefly, if you will, to the requirement for performance reporting under the award? Is that fulfilled when you do your performance report in TRACS? Or when is that fulfilled? Just want to make certain that everybody walks away with a clear understanding.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we know that there's the requirement in 2 CFR 200 for both performance and financial reporting to be submitted when you receive an award. And so because we have TRACS is helping us track our performance reporting and to be able to have these metrics that we can roll up at a national level. That is our vehicle to produce the performance report, but the official record is being submitted via Grant Solutions, and that's true for both the performance report and the financial report. So to really close that grants management loop, it's really the action of submitting those reports in Grant Solutions that closes the loop and brings it all back home. So hopefully that answers your question, Ryan.
Yeah, it does, Mike. Thank you. So just, if we hypothetically take like I assume many of these awards, it seems like they will have a final performance report due, if my memory is correct on Yona's slide, April 29th, I believe was the date, if we assume that's correct. So if I'm understanding you, Mike, then that means then that the performance report and the financial reports must be submitted in Grant Solutions by April 29th. That is the important message to get home. We don't need the performance reports just created in TRACS by April 29th. We actually need them submitted in Grant Solutions by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's touching back to a question that someone had asked earlier of maybe how long it takes for getting the stages of TRACS reporting through all of the approvals. So we really encourage you to start early. You don't want to start your TRACS performance reporting the day before your reports are due in Grant Solutions, because it would be difficult to get all of those steps through to completion and final approved status, so you can then upload the report into Grant Solutions. So I really encourage all of you to start early, and certainly happy to have any of you reach out with any questions that you might have on that.
And Mike, that I think this conversation spearheaded. There's a question in the chat, if you could address that.
Let's see here. Yeah, a question for Megan. Let me just read. So in the NOAs for the multi-state awards, it says that we also have to mail hard copies of the report to the WSFR program and electronic copies to be sent to John Strempel. Is that all actually required in addition to TRACS and Grant Solutions? And John has followed up. We are talking about publications to both WSFR and AFWA. So John, maybe you could speak to that specific requirement. There may be additional terms and conditions on the notices of award that recipients would need to adhere to. But speaking broadly from the standpoint of financial assistance requirements, closing the loop in Grant Solutions by submitting that performance report and financial report in Grant Solutions are those steps from a financial assistance standpoint.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, those reports that would be inputted in, through TRACS and of course into Grant Solutions are the standard reports, as you went through. But there'll be sometimes there's publications that are produced or some kind of pamphlets or whatever, and we're looking for copies of those to be sent to both WSFR and AFWA. They should have the address, contact for Savannah and myself there. So that's what we're getting at there.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, John.
So John, just to clarify, those things you're talking about are above and beyond, say, the final performance report. Those are actual products that sometimes come out of multi-state awards. Absolutely, yeah. That's well within a federal awarding agency and AFWA's authorities to ask for copies of those. Absolutely.
We also get recipients will even upload those into Grant Solutions even now.
Sure.
They do that even now.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, John.
Sure.
So Jim, I see your question. Contact info if you have a question or go through help desk. So great question. So if you have Grant Solutions specific questions, potentially you could send those my way. We also have some staff on the call who are providing support to recipients for the multi-state conservation grant program recipients. If it's a TRACS specific question, then we would recommend you go through the help desk to have those questions answered. Great question.
Mike, I had something too.
Sure.
So I would really encourage the applicants to go in their TRACS and make sure and see if their report, if their TRACS is ready for their reports, because there were like few hiccups on the latest ones, and I had to contact participants because there were like things missing or things not complete. So please go in, look if it's ready, and if not, contact Debbie or whoever the contact is for Grant Solutions to get that resolved and be ready to enter your performance reports. It does take time to approve those. Those performance reports are going through my approval and through John Strempel approval. Also, do not forget that this is the time where WSFR is trying to get awards for the 2023 out of the door. So busy times, they will not turn around fast. So give yourself some time if you want to have a final approved report to enter in Grant Solutions.
Yeah. Agreed. Thanks, Silvana. Can't stress enough that starting early can really help stem some of the problems that you may run into, especially if this is your first time going through the reporting process for either of these systems. All right. Any other questions? And we're happy to hang on here. We've got still another 30 minutes scheduled, so happy to stay on. Let's see. Deb just oh, so Deb had just made the comment hers is not ready for submission, but I thought I hear we should give it a little time. Deb, maybe you're referring to that maybe your report isn't quite ready for submission, but you could still log into TRACS to see, just to make sure that the reporting fields are available. I see you raise your hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks, I appreciate it and appreciate this webinar today. I guess what I thought I heard in the first part was that if we went in today and saw that it wasn't green, so mine is not green, like I physically couldn't enter any reporting if I wanted to, that we should give it a little time, but maybe I'm wrong. Like it sounded like we shouldn't reach right out to the help desk, but maybe I misheard that. I wasn't sure.
No, you should go ahead and reach out to the TRACS help desk. I
Okay.
am keeping a list of those federal awards that are missing the period of performance and or the dates are incorrect. So that when we do import those dates from Grant Solutions, that I can verify those dates before contacting you.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I guess I'll just reach out to the help desk with the grant federal award number, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Debbie.
Oh, you're
So
welcome. At the same time.
Yeah, Debbie helping Deb.
Reiterate, if you do have a performance report that is due and the period of performance are not available, to go ahead and request an extension in Grant Solutions.
Yeah. Agreed. Great point to potentially buy yourself a little more time if there's an issue.
Yes.
So I wanted to go, so I thought Lori has a question. I want to scroll, let's see if I can scroll back here so we can look at this particular field. This first section that we talked about, the federal cash on hand. And so Lori asked the question, can you go over how much time the recipient has to return cash on hand through ASAP? And so just to clarify, if a recipient does have cash on hand at the time that they're submitting an interim report, that may be fine because they may have expenses that have not been paid yet, and maybe just where it falls in the order that the report was submitted, that they may have cash on hand for a limited amount of time. And so the expectation then is that cash would ultimately be spent on a project expenditures that are approved under the award. Now, one thing to point out is that recipients should not be drawing the entire amount of obligated funds in ASAP, say during the first month of the grant, and then just sitting on those funds. The purpose is that you're using the cash that's needed to complete the project, but not bringing that in and letting it just sit idly in your organization's bank account. So I think that's hopefully that's getting to your question, Lori.
And Mike, if I could chime in.
Sure.
Yeah, Lori, I great question you ask. I don't know if we're answering or not. If you feel like we're missing it, could you maybe elaborate a little bit more? But as Mike's saying, many multi-state projects are perhaps 1-year awards. And regardless whether it's a 1-year award or a multi-year award, at the time of submission of the final financial report, there really should be zero cash on hand. A recipient really should not be submitting a final financial report with cash on hand, because what that designates is that if the form is filled out correctly, that actually designates that the recipient drew more federal funds than they actually had expenditures to pay for, and the recipient actually made profits under the award. So if a final financial report is submitted with cash on hand, that would trigger a question on behalf of WSFR to reach back out to the recipient and ask some additional detailed questions.
Yeah, thanks for covering that. I guess I wanted to go a little bit further. If the recipient has to return funds, you know, what's the time period they have to return those funds to ASAP? Let's say they're doing their final financial status report and they've, you know, they've got cash on hand. At how many days do they have to return those funds through ASAP after the period of performance? It's either 90 or 120. I guess
yeah. Mike, do you want that, or
you go ahead? You can take that one, Ryan.
So yeah. Okay, now I'm following your question, Lori. I apologize for missing it the first go around. Yes, you're right. Is at the end of the grant period of performance, a recipient, if the period of performance is done, the recipient has 120 days to wrap up all their expenditures and produce that final financial report. So in essence, you could, if a recipient overdrew cash, they have 120 days before that final financial report is due to the federal awarding agency. And during that 120 days, that would be when they would want to return that cash. We definitely wouldn't want to see a recipient take 120 days, submit a final financial report with cash on hand, and say we need more time to return that cash on hand. That's not what the intent is. That's why the federal government gives you 120 days after the period of performance to continue going over and closing out your books, to include getting all invoices that are straggling in, as well as returning any overdrawn funds.
Yeah, great response to that, Ryan. The light bulb just went on for me that we were talking about the closing out the books, essentially, not necessarily that a check would have to be sent. So the goal would be to have all of that fully liquidated and your expenses paid by that 120-day point.
Thank you.
Yep. And if you know, there are sometimes it takes time, you know, sometimes, you know, contractors and vendors aren't the most timely submitting their invoices. We all know that. It's a busy world we live in. In the event that a recipient does need more time, there is allowance in service manual chapter for John and Lori and the grants managers to authorize a reporting period extension. The service can allow and grant recipients up to one extension, and up to a maximum of that one extension being 90 days if you need more time to close up the books. But we just want to make certain everybody's aware that 90-day extension isn't to give you more time to complete the work. The period of performance is still done. So you can't incur more expenditures during that extension. That's just you saying, hey, we need more time to close out our books. And it's up to the grants managers whether they approve that reporting period extension or not.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. Is there a limit to the number of performance period extensions we could request? So what Ryan was just speaking to was the reporting extensions, and you can only request one to a maximum of 90 days. And so I think, Brianna, what you're asking is a period of performance, so essentially extending the grant to have additional time. And so that is it is possible to request an extension, but that would have to be approved and granted by the federal awarding agency. So depending on the justification that you have for your request, that would be taken on a case-by-case basis. welcome. Any other questions? Again, keep them coming. We're happy to stay on here. We still got 20 minutes scheduled here. All right. Well, we're happy to stay on, but I guess if we can start to wrap up here, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Again, we are recording this, and so we'll have a link out for others who maybe weren't able to be here, or if you want to go back and review something, or you just had so much fun, you have to see it again right when it becomes available and released at a theater coming near you. So thank you to Yona. Thanks to Ryan and Heidi for running point here on the webinar as well. Thanks to everybody else, Debbie in particular, for being here, answering some questions. Danielle, Nicole, John, Lori, Silvana, really appreciate all the coordination you guys are doing to help us make these webinars a reality and get these important grant funds out the door and doing the good work that Congress intended for these programs. So with that, I guess I'll pause briefly, but if unless there's anything else, have a nice day, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.